Ruthless Compassion is a podcast that shows you how to become fiercely kind. I'm the host, Dr. Marcia Sirota, and in each episode, I get into it with experts and regular folks about the things that get in the way of what we want. Things like addiction and mental health, isolation and loneliness, difficult family and work relationships, and the importance of self-care. I want to help you overcome the obstacles to living your best life, and I want to inspire you to become a powerful kindness warrior. Lenore Skenazy is an American blogger, columnist, author, and reality show host. A mother who lives in Queens with her husband and two sons, her controversial decision to let her then 9-year-old son take the New York City subway home alone became a national story and prompted massive media attention. She was dubbed America's Worst Mom. In response, Skenazy founded the book, blog, and movement Free Range Kids, with the aim of fighting the belief that our children are in constant danger from creeps, kidnapping, germs, grades, flashers, frustration, failure, baby snatchers, bugs, bullies, men, sleepovers, and or the perils of non-organic grapes. Today, she's the founder with Peter Gray of the Let Grow movement, which enables children to grow into healthy, happy, and high-functioning adults. Welcome, Lenore Skenazy, to the Ruthless Compassion Podcast. Welcome, Lenore Skenazy, to the Ruthless Compassion Podcast.
Please be ruthlessly compassionate with me, Marcia. I'm excited to be here.
Wonderful. Well, the first question I always like to ask my guests is, who are you and what do you do?
The two stumpers. So who am I? I am, apparently I'm America's Worst Mom. If you Google that, you'll find me there for 77 Google pages. I sort of came to prominence 10 years ago when I let my 9-year-old ride the subway alone. And I'm a newspaper columnist by trade, so I wrote a column, Why I Let My 9-Year-Old Ride the Subway Alone, and 2 days later I was on the Today Show, MSNBC, Fox News, and National Public Radio, defending myself. And so I didn't realize I was a radical at the time. I just thought I was a person, right? A mom with a column. But so since then, I started a blog called Free Range Kids, which the whole point of that, which became a book and a movement, is that our kids aren't in constant danger. I don't know why we think they are, but we don't have to think of them that way. We certainly don't have to overprotect them the way we've been doing for the last generation. And I don't think it's doing anyone any favors. Moms who end up having to drive our kids absolutely everywhere and sit through 1 million soccer practices every week, or kids who are stuck in the back seat and sort of treated like packages that have to be delivered here and there. So I started Free Range Kids, but now I'm the president of a nonprofit called Let Grow. And Let Grow is basically Free Range Kids with some benefactors, thank God. I'm knocking on my wooden table here.
Well, there's so many questions that come to mind when you talk about that. I just want to go back to when you wrote that first article. Mm-hmm. What kind of reactions did you get from people who were so, up in arms about you letting your 9-year-old ride the bus on his own?
Subway, my dear.
Subway.
I think the fact that it was subterranean really triggered something for people. Hell is down there, and that's where I was sending my kid. That was basically the reaction. What was interesting is that there are some people who said, oh, yeah, I loved riding the subway. I was a kid. I did all of this. I'm in New York City, so I was surrounded by a lot of people who remembered early subway rides. I got a phone call from this elderly man who called to tell me about his first subway ride when he was 10, and he was going to his grandmother's house, and his mother let him take his little sister with him, who was 8, and they were on the train, and snow was falling, and it was on the tracks, and he remembers it clearly. And he was calling me out of the blue. He'd found me in the phone book. I'm sure he had a phone book because he was like 90-something years old. And this train ride that he was remembering was from 1929. So there's something about freedom and parents trusting you that is very, very deep. And the pushback I got was from people who remembered stuff like that, who remembered their happy independence and riding their bikes till the streetlights came on, and yet felt like to let a child do anything like that now was tantamount to sending them off to die. And why didn't I care? And how would I have felt? And the how would I have felt question has come up in not every interview, but I would say 3/4 of the interviews I've done in the intervening 10 years. And it was always this. It was, okay, yeah, you let him ride it. How did he like it? He loved it. How does he feel now? He's great. He's 10 years later now. He's 19. He's fine. But the question was always, but Lenore, and the voice would go very low and shaky almost, and say, how would you have felt if he never came home? And I never had an answer for that. I would always go like, I don't know. How do you think I'd feel? And, or I'd say, I have a spare son at home. Actually, I have 2 sons. We never talk about the other one. So what I finally realized after literally years of that question being thrown at me is that the reason I didn't have an answer is because it wasn't a question. How would I feel if he never came home? Take a guess. Everybody knows I'd feel, obviously regretful, sorrowful, mournful. I would hate myself, blah, 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 blah. But if everyone knows the answer, why are they asking the question? And the reason is it was an accusation, right? It was telling me that I wasn't thinking the correct way that we're supposed to think as parents in 20 whatever, which is that you're supposed to go to the very darkest, worst case scenario first and proceed as if it's likely to happen, right? I call it worst first thinking. And if you're not thinking that way, if you're thinking, well, the odds are really good that he'll be fine. I want him to have some independence. I did this as a kid. Crime today is back to the rate it was in 1963, which is true. The crime rate is, at a 50-year low. If you're thinking like a rational person, you don't care. You're not a good enough mom. A good mom is really somebody who is constantly worried, who sees the entire world as a threat, who thinks that her job is to act as a bodyguard for a vulnerable baby who is under constant threat of death. And that really upsets me because it means that to be a decent, loving, reasonable mom is not enough. You really have to be paranoid and crazy to be considered a good mom.
Yes, absolutely. And it is a really nutty attitude, although I'm sure with the best of intentions, these are obviously people who care about their kids. But so what happens when parents parent this way, when they treat their children like, delicate pieces of porcelain that they have to wrap in bubble wrap and then transport very carefully from point A to point B with 100% time under adult supervision? What happens to these young people? What have you observed?
Well, one thing I just want to do is I don't want to blame the parents for doing that because there's so many societal pressures. There's even some laws that are forbidding them from giving their kids the freedom that most of us had to walk to school or play outside or go to a friend's house without a security detail. So I think of it as society-wide because not only are there those pressures, but we've been so brainwashed with fear. There's just, it's hard to read a newspaper or turn on the TV or go to your Facebook posts without somebody passing along something that is very scary. So I don't blame parents for being scared, and I don't blame them for feeling like they have to overprotect even if it goes against their own best judgment. But what happens is, the word is overprotection. You overprotect and things don't develop like normal. I mean, it's baked into the culture now. When I was going to school, and probably when you were going to school too, in the morning you walked there and that was arrival, right? The bell rang. Arrival. Okay. And then the bell rang at 3:00 in the afternoon. Dismissal. Hooray. But now it's drop off in the morning and pick up in the afternoon. The very words suggest that the kids are exactly what you say, teacups, bubble wrapped to be delivered like a package to the school and then picked up. And packages don't have legs or brains or thoughts or time on their hands. All they are is inert. And so to treat kids like they don't need any time to get lost, make friends, run around the neighborhood, get to know the local dogs, figure out how to, walk around the block where there's a bully, is to assume that there's nothing that needs to be developed except those teachable moments with us in the car when we're talking about their day. But in fact, kids are programmed to learn through playing and exploring and being, and not even just being, through being part of the world. And to take all that away from them is to stunt them. And I don't think it's fair to either generation, to the kids who are being stuck in the car seat for their entire lives, or to the parents who are stuck behind the wheel of the car, driving them everywhere. It wastes both of their time and to no good end.
I completely agree with you, and I agree that it's even parents who want to parent sanely have such pressure on them
Right.
by schools, by the government, by
Right.
the society to parent in this crazy bubble wrapping way. So even if they want to, they're stymied. There was a story from a man in Canada, in the West Coast,
who
sent his children on the bus, and he was threatened with having his custody removed if he kept doing this. Yeah.
Right. No, I remember that case. The guy had a funny last name, like Robber or Crook. Crook was his last name. And he had actually been, people think as free-range kids or as let grow, let those kids go. We don't care where they are. Is it a feral childhood that we're offering kids? And really, he was a perfect example of a free-range dad in that he trained his kids. He went with them for months, teaching them this. I get on the bus, off the bus. I doubt they needed months of care, but he made sure that they were properly educated as to how to get themselves around. And not only were there no complaints about these kids, but somebody actually tracked down the bus driver to give a letter to the kids saying, for the kids to give the dad saying, I watched your kids on the bus. I was so impressed. They were so composed, well-behaved. I wish we could see more kids like this. But the mere fact that they were young and on a bus without an adult made somebody complain about them. And when this complaint reached the authorities, rather than use their own brains and say, well, looks like everything's fine, the kids aren't in danger, they weren't disruptive. Canada is like the safest place in the world to live. Great, good for them. They scoured the books looking to see, is this allowed? Is this okay? And they came upon a really horrible decision that had been made by the British Columbian Supreme Court 2 or 3 years ago that I'd written about at the time, which was that a mom let her 8-year-old wait at home in the after school for like an hour or two before she got home, which is a traditional latchkey kid. But she was in the midst of a miserable divorce, and the husband said, I don't think the child is safe enough waiting at home. And the case went up to the Supreme Court, and the judge listened to the mom saying, I think he's fine, and listened to a social work saying, well, I don't think 8 years old is old enough. What if something terrible happens? And once again, we're back to that same thing. How would she feel if the house burned down? You're allowed once again to go to the very worst case scenario first, proceed as if it's likely to happen. And the judge said, well, that's a good point. And I would certainly trust a social worker who knows so much about child development. And he ruled that nobody under age 10 could be home alone. And then the social workers dealing with the case of these 4 kids who took the bus alone, they were ages 11 on down to 7, said, well, I don't think they should be outside of the home alone either. And pretty soon they were grounded, and they were grounded to the point where they had no freedom, and the dad couldn't even let them go outside or run to the store anymore because for, quote unquote, their safety's sake, he had to be with them at all times. This is a decision that goes against every bit of child development that has ever been studied, as well as common sense, as well as what anybody could see with their naked eyes. These kids were well behaved. They were ready to be part of society, and a dad was stymied by stupid authorities.
Yeah, it's a tragic, tragic story. I believe that the father is pursuing this case up to the highest level because it's a travesty. It's a travesty of parenting, and it's a travesty for the children because, yes, they're going to be crippled. First they were empowered by the dad, and now they're being crippled by the government.
That's what led me to start realizing how much I wanted the government out of parenting lives. And I have to say, we had a triumph recently in Utah. I don't know if you want to hear about it.
Absolutely. Okay,
so... Sorry. I wrote a law, and it was one sentence long because I'm a tabloid reporter by trade. I worked for the Daily News here in New York forever and ever. And so my law said our children have the right to some unsupervised time, and parents have the right to give it to them without getting arrested. But then I went to somebody at the Reason Foundation. It's a libertarian organization. And they turned it into what sounded like actual legalese. And I found a senator in Arkansas who proposed it in the Arkansas state legislature. It died because the head of, somebody said, but hey, children could be kidnapped at any time, and that was enough to kill it. But just this past month, there was it was voted on in Utah, and it was voted on by the Senate and then by the House, both houses of Congress in Utah, and it passed unanimously, which is amazing to me. And it's been reported as the free-range kids law. And it says, free-range kids law passes in Utah. Finally, parents don't have to worry about getting arrested or being stopped or being second-guessed or investigated if they let their kids walk outside, play outside, walk to school, wait briefly in the car. These are things that parents were always allowed to do in the past, and it's only recently that we started arresting parents for it. And Utah said, we want no part of that. We want parents who know their kids better than some passing busybody or some local social worker to decide, okay, my kids are ready to ride the bus. My kid's ready to play in the park. My kid can go 3 houses down and knock on their friend's door, and I don't want to have to worry that this is going to be considered negligence or even worse, abuse, simply because I know my kids and my community and I want them to be part of it. So kudos to Utah. And I feel like if Utah passed this with unanimous, right, left, Democrat, Republican, both sides saying that this sounded right to them, well, it's not going to seem like a crazy radical law elsewhere. It's not partisan. It's not unpopular, and I'm hoping that it will become the law throughout the United States and Canada too.
Absolutely. Let's keep working along those lines. Now, you have this free-range kids group. What exactly do you do with that, other than making wonderful new laws?
Yeah, right. Well, free-range kids has sort of morphed into Let Grow. So if you go to free-range kids, if you went to freerangekids.com, and there's a big thing that says go to Let Grow. So you go to Let Grow. And the difference is this. Free-range kids was, I spent 10 years lecturing around the country, around the world. My God, I've spent a lot of time in Canada, spent time in Australia, England, you name it, lecturing about how did we get so afraid for our kids. It just doesn't make sense. Crime goes down, fear goes up. But at some point, I just got a little tired of people nodding along, because people do nod along. People, I'm not a crazy person. What I say makes sense to many people, not to everyone. But how do we change actual behavior to give kids back this freedom? I mean, if I want to send my kid outside after school, but I look outside and he, more importantly, looks outside and there's no one outside to play with, nobody at the park, nobody walking around, he's not going to go outside. He's going to either stay inside on on some kind of electronic device, or he'll end up in an after-school program, a soccer or little league, and there's nothing wrong with any of those, but those aren't play. They're not free time. If you're at little league, somebody is teaching you how to bat the ball, and then they're telling you you're playing this position, and now it's this, you're on this team, and you bring the snack this week, and now the game is over, and by the way, the ball was out. So all of that is done by an adult. So if you want to give your kids some kind of freedom like we had to make up some games, to go and explore, to get on your bike, how can we make that normal again so that people actually do it instead of going, oh, yeah, I wish we could do that, and then, going back to driving them to Little League. So Let Grow is like racking its brain, which is basically me and my executive director. We rack our brains and we try to come up with real-world solutions that will help people free their kids. And that's what we're doing now. We're trying to get schools to do the 2 projects that we've come up with, and we're trying to grow the community on Let Grow, which is letgrow.org. You go there and you can enter your name and your postal code or your zip code and try to find other people in the neighborhood who might also want to send out their kids. And we're doing things like everybody on Let Grow Thursday night, have your kids make dinner. And we're hoping that this is popular and people go, okay, let's all do that. And they have their kids make dinner, and then they put a picture on Instagram or on Facebook, and then other parents see it and say, oh, I'm going to try that too. So we're just trying to make real world change that is not radical and is not difficult and doesn't take a lot of time, that just renormalizes letting your kids have some independence. And I can tell you about our 2 projects that are in the schools, or we can talk about whatever else you want.
No, absolutely. I want to hear about these.
Okay, well, they're really simple. One of them is so simple it's almost ridiculous. It's fast and it's free, and it's called the Let Grow Project. I'm just making a video about it now. So the Let Grow Project is teachers tell their kids to go home and ask their parents if they can do one thing that they feel they're ready to do that on their own that for some reason they haven't done yet. It could be walk the dog, make dinner, go to a friend's house, get yourself to school tomorrow morning. And because the school is endorsing it, so it's not like me being a crazy parent, it's the school is saying that this is good for the kids. And because all the other kids and parents are doing it, it's easy to do. So I was just, oh my God, I don't have it in front of me. I was just making a list of all the things that one middle school, which is a junior high here in New York City, just did. And they had their kids, one kid went to the store and got eggs, and another kid walked herself to school, and a boy got himself to his guitar lesson, and somebody else made dinner. And they're very basic things that nobody would have thought about twice when we were growing up if a kid did them. But now it's, these were actual things that the parents had to agree to. And then I wish I had my script here because I would read you. I went through all the responses. We had the parents the parents and kids do a before and after survey. And the responses are just so incredible that everybody should do this. The parents were saying, oh my God, I had no idea how competent my kid is. We really underestimated her. Now he's fearless. She's growing up. She's not my little girl. I still worry, but so much less. So I added up. We had a before and after scale of anxiety of 1 to 10, and I added up all the numbers and divided just like you do to do averages in math class, and the average parent's anxiety level dropped about 11%, which is amazing. But then for the kids, I said, how do you feel? And 56% said they were happier.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. And from what? From an afternoon. And some of the things that the kids said was like, now my parents trust me more. Now I get to do things. One kid said, there's a whole world for me to explore. And who doesn't want that for their kid? That they feel like instead of there's a terrifying world out there that they're so scared of and that their parents have to be with them all the time versus it's my world too. So it's the Let Grow project. It's on Let Grow, our site, and it's just that. I mean, you can figure it out without even going to our site. It's tell the kids to go home and do something on their own, and then if you want, you can have them write an essay about it or draw a picture, depending on how old they are, or not. It can just be that, and it really takes very little school time. It takes maybe 10 minutes to explain it. If you go, if you go to our site, I'm sorry that I sound like I'm plugging our site, but there's a list of projects that you might want to do, like you can go pick up your younger sibling from school, you can go visit your grandparent, you can do whatever. So that's one project that I think will actually become very popular eventually because we have 7 schools doing this as a pilot project on Long Island. And the coolest thing is that about 3 weeks after they had done this, I went out to talk to them and see how it was. And I was talking to the principal, and she showed me on her phone somebody on Facebook showing her son's Let Grow project. And I don't remember what he'd done, but she said, what's interesting about this? And frankly, the project didn't sound that interesting. I can't remember. And I said, no. And she said, that's not a parent in our district. So that means that people from her district had been posting on Facebook, look, my kid's doing the dishes, my kid's raking the leaves, my kid got himself to school. And parents in other districts were jealous. And they're like, how come my kid's not doing that? And they demanded that their school do the Let Grow project. And the school said, oh, okay. And so I think once people hear about it and do it, and parents naturally go to social media, it is going to be viral across district after district, and eventually I think it's just going to be a normal part of schooling is that kids do reading, writing, arithmetic, and the Let Grow project because it's so easy and so transformative. So I'm very high on that project. And the other initiative we're doing is simply after school free play, which means leaving schools open so that the kids can stay there and not necessarily do chess or ceramics. Those things are fine, but also leave the gym or the playground open for kids to play. And that sounds like something that, first of all, I hope some schools are already doing it, but a lot aren't. And a lot of parents don't even think that makes sense because why should they be wasting their time playing when they could be taking Mandarin or piano? And I'm all for Mandarin and piano, but playing teaches them so much that will make them so much more ready for college, for the workforce. I mean, you have to decide what you're going to do when you're with your friends. You have to come up with rules. You have to make teams. These all require all sorts of social skills that you want your kids to develop. And then if you have a 12-year-old who's kind of awkward, but they get to show the 9-year-olds how to play a certain game, well, then the 12-year-old is suddenly a hero instead of a loser. And that changes that 12-year-old and certainly changes their school day. They're not coming there to be, to be sad. They're coming there to triumph. And if you have kids who have to, hold it together when you're playing a game, you're the 7-year-old, you don't want to fall apart in front of the 9-year-olds. You don't want to look like a baby. So instead of throwing down your bat, if you strike out, you pull it together and you go to the back of the line. And in doing that, you're learning maturity and executive function. And so all these things, flexibility, I don't want to play my game. I don't want to play your game. Let's play another game, or let's incorporate your idea into my game. All these things are the skills that your kids need. And, in the future, there's going to be robots doing everything that robots can do, right? They're going to be doing the math, and they're going to be doing the spell check. They already are. But they can't make up a game. They can't compromise with a friend. They can't tell a joke. They can't feel proud. They can't tell another kid, come on in and join us. And so those skills, the skills that you get in free play that you cannot get in an adult-organized, adult-led activity are the ones that kids are going to need. We call them non-robot skills. So if you want to future-proof your kid, free play is the way to go. And there's no way to get free play in the real world anymore because kids are all inside or they're in organized activities. But if you allow it at school, it's a place that parents trust. There's a bunch of kids there already. They're all different ages. And if the adults just step back and let the kids figure out what they want to do, maybe give them some supplies, jump ropes and balls and chalk, whatever, you're just going to see a transformation that will stun the parents. And so far it's been most delightful to the principals who have done it because the kids on free play day, there's no absences. Everybody wants to come and everybody's in a better mood and they're ready to learn.
That's so incredible. And it's so funny because this project exactly mirrors my childhood, except I was doing it on the block by my house. We just all got together, kids of all ages. We got on our bikes, we got on our skateboards, we ran to the park, we made up games, we played with each other, we did all those things that you're talking about, learned all those skills, and that was my normal childhood. And then at around 8 o'clock, our parents would stand on the porch and yell our names, and we'd all come back home. That was my childhood, and we did this every single day of the summer and many days of the winter. Right.
Now, can you imagine having a childhood with none of that?
It's horrifying to me.
Yeah. I mean, one of the questions I sometimes ask is, would you want to grow up micromanaged this way? There was an ad for, I think it was Subaru, and it was showing a kid in a car seat and then a little older and then finally, rolling her eyes at her mom. And it said, the back seat of the Subaru is where our kid said her first words and made her first friend and got to everything. And it's like, wow, this is normalizing, the animal transport of children and making it seem like, do you want to grow up in literally like the 3 feet of the back seat of your parents' car? How insulting and awful.
Yeah, it doesn't give young people any credit for their intelligence, their ability to problem solve, their resourcefulness, their resilience, and it certainly doesn't help them develop those things.
Exactly. That's exactly what I say. You could give my talk. That's exactly it. I mean, and also it is insulting. It's insulting to the human species. And also you look around, first of all, there's your own childhood that proved that a lot more freedom was just fine. And then you look around the world and you see 4 and 5-year-olds in Japan walk to school and they take the subway. So what is it about our kids that I was in a 5th grade classroom just talking to the kids and recently, and I don't know, there were maybe 30 kids in the room, 25 or 30. And I said, how many of you are allowed outside on your own? And almost everybody raised their hand. And I said, how many of you are allowed to go around the corner? Because some kids have been telling me that they were allowed out, but just not allowed around the corner. And all the hands came down except 5.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, that's hysteria. That's mass hysteria.
I was walking to school at 5 and, sometimes I'd get snow in my boot and sometimes I'd fall down and skin my knee. And certainly there were a lot of patches on the corduroys when we were kids, but everyone survived. And in fact, I think we thrived.
I'm sure you did. I'm sure you did. And that's what's so crazy about it. We think that we're doing everything for our kids, except we're taking away the one thing that we cherished the most, which was our freedom and our adventures, our autonomy. And, it's, what could I say? The same thing. I mean, the phrase I finally came up with, why do things take me 10 years? I don't know, but always doing, what is it? Always doing everything for our kids. Oh, I can't even remember my own phrase. Oh, always helping our kids isn't always helping them.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, why can't I remember it? It's so simple. Because always
it's
helping
so
our
simple.
kids. Yeah, right.
So what would you like for us today? Like, if you had a wish, what would be your wish as a parent and as just a person in our society?
I wish that somehow we could lift this fog of fear that is really almost impenetrable. I live in New York City, and I love it. But once in a very long while, I go to Staten Island, which is across from downtown Manhattan. And when I look back at Manhattan, I can see that there's a brown haze over it. I'm in New York City now. It doesn't feel like there's a brown haze. It looks like it's nice and clear air. But there is actually pollution that I'm breathing in, and I feel the same way about fear. When you you go on Facebook and some mom says, oh, my child, I think, was about to be sex trafficked from IKEA. And it's like, well, really? Because I checked with the FBI, and they say there have been no cases ever of a young child taken from a public place for sex trafficking purposes in America. But this is like a constant, trope on Facebook, or if you turn on the news and there's just some horrible story, or if you read a mystery and it's always about a disemboweled after they've been sexually abused child. I mean, it's just everything is so gloomy and fearful, and Law and Order is on 24 hours a day. It seems like 25 hours a day. Law and Order is on. So if there was some way to recognize that this fear is being shoved down our throats, and to reject it, to be insulted by the idea that we're supposed to be afraid all the time, afraid to the point where we can't let our kids walk outside or play a game outside with their friends or go to a neighbor's house without a security detail. I would love the fear to lift. And part of it is just getting insulted that this is the way we're treated, that the only thing we respond to is fear, and so they'll just give us more fear.
It's funny, we're talking about the meddling of foreign powers in our in the United States recent elections, and all how they are using the internet to create chaos and preach fear. And I wonder if there was some kind of conspiracy back when by some foreign power to preach fear so as to disrupt our society and cripple our future generations. I don't think it really happened, but
no, I don't think it really happened. But what a perfect analogy, because we say land of the free, home of the brave. It's like, how free? I mean, we're so afraid in America. We have 7 times the number of people in prison as any other developed country. Most countries have 100 per 100,000 people. We have 700 per 100,000 people. So we are really afraid. We're really afraid, and with fear comes vengeance, because you'll do anything to save yourself, your family, your community. And so aside from all the wasted time, not just driving the kids there, but keeping tabs on them. I mean, and it's, it's not just the government that's making us afraid or the media that's making us afraid. There's the marketplace that's trying to make us afraid, so it can sell us all the GPSing devices that you're supposed to put on your kids. There are alarms you can put on your kids that go woo, 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 when your kid walks a few feet away from you. There are devices that allow you to read all their texts and search what were they looking at online and look at all the pictures that they've downloaded. I mean, we're really encouraged to become a complete surveillance society. And that is all predicated on the idea that something terrible is happening. Either something is happening to your kid, or your kid is doing something horrible, or they're being seduced into something awful, or there's bad forces all around. And, we forget that actually most people are good, and we live in, pretty safe times, not perfectly safe times. If you're waiting for perfect safety, you're going to wait a long time. If you're waiting for perfect safety before you let your kid walk to school, just be glad that your mom didn't wait for that for you, because even back in the olden days, it wasn't that there was no crime. It's that we didn't do that worst first thinking, come up with the worst case scenario first. And if you don't proceed as if it's likely to happen, there's something wrong with you.
As a psychiatrist, I'm very often talking to people about their defense mechanisms. And the way defense mechanisms are meant to work, they're supposed to help them and defend them from things. But invariably, defense mechanisms are dysfunctional and actually create the opposite of what they're intended to do. So in this case, I think the terrible thing that's happening is the fact that these children are being emotionally crippled by this bubble wrapping and this overprotecting. So these parents who are defending their children from these things they're fearing this horrible outcome, they're actually creating the horrible outcome by overprotecting these children. So the thing that they're afraid of is not the problem. The thing that they're doing out of their fear has become the problem.
I know. Actually, one example I sometimes read out loud just to show people what we're talking about is I got a letter from a 15-year-old once, and he said that he's not allowed outside to even wait at the bus stop because it's too dangerous. And so he said he found himself at home eating junk food and playing video games, which he liked, but he was kind of bored. And he said, I don't want my kids, if I ever have kids, to live like this. And I read it because the parents are so afraid of him being kidnapped that they kidnapped him, right? He's stuck in his house whenever they're not there because they're afraid for him. And they're treating him like Rapunzel. And Rapunzel is a good story too for a defense mechanism that did not work, right? I'll just keep her in the tower. That'll be great. No. And why is there a fairy tale about it? Because it's a normal parental impulse and it backfires, just like you were saying.
Yeah, it really causes the harm, the kind of harm that the parents are trying to avoid.
Right.
It really is giving exactly the opposite outcome. And yes, why would any child want to live like that? It's not a normal, healthy life. It's not free. It's not empowered. It's not open for any wonderful or new experiences. It sounds like, better to go outside and fall down and break your leg than to stay in the tower and never have a life.
Right. Well, that's what I'm hoping people will recognize. And an easy way to recognize it is just to think back on your own childhood. Would you rather somebody was telling me about, yesterday I was talking to a guy, and he said, he was talking about getting mugged on his way to school. He grew up in the 70s in New York City, and it was a much more dangerous town back then. And he said he was talking to his father now, who's in his 90s, and he was saying like, oh, yeah, that was the time I didn't get mugged or something. And his dad said, what, you got mugged on the way to school? He said, oh, yeah. And he said, how often? He said, well, not every week, but a lot. And it was better to get mugged after school because you'd already eaten lunch and you'd spent your lunch money. And the dad was like, what? Why didn't you ever tell me? And my friend said, because then you wouldn't have let me go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, look, we all did things as kids. We all took chances. We all had things happen. But the vast, vast, vast majority of us survived our childhood. And all these things that happened to us were learning opportunities and experiences. And this desire to insulate children from every single life experience is a wrong-headed desire, because all those experiences are necessary, as you described, for learning and growth. And without them, we are deficient, and we can't function in the future in school, in higher education, in our jobs, in our marriages. That's, I think, one of the reasons why so many marriages are struggling, because people don't know how to resolve problems because they've been so overprotected.
Well, another phrase I'm trying to popularize is, we can't raise problem solvers if we're always there solving their problems. So, you need some experience. You even need some bad experiences. We were running an essay contest for Let Grow, which was, one of the questions was, write a thank you letter to a jerk you learned something from, even though you didn't think so at the time. And I was expecting, these were high school students, kids to write like, my high school teacher taught me that communism was bad, and I said he was wrong. And then I went to, Venezuela, and I realized, oh, maybe he was right. I thought it would be an intellectual revelation. But in fact, hundreds of kids entered this contest and said, I want to thank you, my friend, who started out being my best buddy and then started telling me I was ugly or fat or stupid, and I was feeling so terrible about myself, and I went home and I cried, and I didn't like going to school. These were kids who were traumatized, and I don't wish this on anyone, but the conclusion of all these essays from kids across the country who didn't know each other, it wasn't just one class of kids, was, but then I realized you're wrong. And I like my hair and I like my voice. And yes, I can try out for the basketball team, and I'm really smart, and I made new friends and I got better. And now I feel great compassion for other kids who are, hurt or tormented or don't feel good about themselves. But I'm so happy with myself now because I came through the fire and I'm stronger and I realized I'm not going to put up with this anymore and I can advocate for myself and I'm happy with myself. And now I realize there was something wrong with you. So sincerely, you're no longer a tormented friend. And then they'd sign their name. So it was amazing to me because like the first one I got like this, I was like, well, that's a weird essay. I never thought of kids being that hurt. And then after like the 300th one, I'm like, wow, this is a phenomenon out there. And we really are underestimating, A, how mean kids can be to each other, and B, how resilient they are and how ultimately part of maturing is recognizing, who you are and that it's up to you. You can face the music. And, can you face the music if there's never any music? If your parents are always there giving you a teachable moment? I'm not sure.
Yes, absolutely. And I just had this thought, I wonder if kids these days are getting meaner because they're so deeply unhappy, because they're so, they're so insulated and they're so not free. And all they have to do is hang it on their devices. And they're so angry at their families and their schools and their societies for imprisoning them that they take out all this rage and hurt on each other. And this is where all that bullying comes from, because bullying is not about being evil, it's about being deeply unhappy. So you wonder whether all this nastiness is coming because these kids are crying out for help. They're miserable.
That's a really new idea for me. I hadn't thought about that at all, but it reminds me, so before we called it free-range kids, I came up with it. My husband said, call it cage-free kids. And then we ended up calling free-range kids. But cages is what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. And don't caged animals start gnawing each other? And, they'd be fine in the wild and they'd, run together in a pack. But you put 3 of them in a cage and pretty soon they're chewing one another or just sort of festering in misery.
Yes, because the stress of being in the cage makes them anxious and angry, and then they take it out on each other. So you really wonder whether these kids who are caged by their family and school and society are not taking it out on each other because they're so deeply unhappy. And if we let them play free and learn to have compassion and learn to cooperate with each other and learn to enjoy each other freely without all these parents imposing these restrictions on them, if all this nastiness might not abate.
That is really interesting. That's another idea I'm going to start thinking about. So one of the founders of Let Grow is a guy named Peter Gray, who you might be familiar with. He's a professor at Boston College. He's a psychologist, and he wrote a book called Free to Learn. And he talks about how important play is for developing all these social skills that we were just talking about. But he also points out, and I know correlation and causation are different, but the correlation is this. Since the amount of playtime and just basically on your own time, do something that interests you, not that you're being taken to time, has gone down in the last 50 years, anxiety among kids has gone up. And his theory is that what we've done is we've taken away, this is a term you probably know better than me, the children's internal locus of control. And that's when you feel like you have some say over your life. And you can imagine how awful it is not to have an internal locus of control at work where somebody is telling you everything to do and that you're awful and you have no autonomy. Well, it's the same with kids. If somebody's telling you, we're going to play this game and it's going to be played this way and you're on that team versus, hey, guys, let's throw the can in the air and whoever hits it on their nose gets to win, as opposed to being creative and self-actualizing. I hate all these words. But basically, instead of having any freedom, you are under somebody else's thumb all the time. You don't have an internal locus of control. And he says that that's what we have to give back to kids. Not that we let them be feral and not that we let them, not do their chores or not do their homework, but there has to be some time that they are self-directed that is not just all about something that we think that they should be doing and we're going to watch them do it.
Absolutely. I totally agree. So just to sum up now, if people want to find you and explore all these amazing ideas and initiatives that you have, where would they find you, Lenore?
Oh, well, it's really easy. I'm at letgrow.org. And it's a very ugly website at the moment, but in a couple weeks it should look beautiful. But you can navigate it. It's still, you can find, there's programs for schools. I would love anybody who's interested in this idea to talk to their school about doing either the Let Grow project or after school free play. You can join, and eventually we'll have a bunch of people joining, and that way you'll be able to find each other, like I said, by zip code or by neighborhood or postal code. There's the Let Grow proclamation, which basically you can bring to your city council or to your local town and say, shouldn't we say that we believe in kids being outside on their own, and we're not going to arrest the parents, and we're not going to assume that they're neglected? So there's just some very basic and I think easy to do initiatives on there. And then we really do want to grow this network, because if you're on it and I'm on it and I can find you and you can find me, well, we can send our kids out together, or we can, get together and, sort of talk about this with our other friends and bring more people into the fold. We all want to give our kids more freedom. We all want our kids to grow up more healthy, less anxiety. We don't want to spend all our time driving our kids to soccer. What can we do? We have a conversation in our living room and we decide that Saturdays, there's going to be one mom at the park every Saturday and every kid is welcome. So there's just so many easy ways to start giving our kids more freedom in this safest of times in human history. We're just sort of the headquarters for that. So it's letgrow.org.
And it sounds like you've already started your call to action, but let's just formalize it. What would be your call to action for the listeners today?
My call to action would be, particularly if you're involved at all with a school as a parent, a teacher, or principal, to go to letgrow.org and look under the thing that says for schools, and you'll see the Let Grow project. I think that is the easiest, quickest way to change people. It really is giving a whole bunch of people at once permission to let their kids do something that they did when they were kids, and it breaks the ice. It's sort of like, when you finally see your kid start toddling, walking towards you on unstable legs, you're really happy. You're thrilled. I was so bummed I didn't videotape my kid when he did it. But anyways, once you see your kid walking, you don't say, that was so great, now go back to crawling, because that doesn't make sense. And the Let Grow project is the same thing. Once you see your kid can go to the grocery and get those, get the eggs or make the cake or go to a friend's house or get herself to school, you don't say, well, that was great, but now I'm going to stunt you again. It just doesn't work that way. So it's the icebreaker that really changes things, and it's free, like I said, and it's fast and it's easy.
That's wonderful, Lenore. It's really been a tremendous pleasure talking to you today, and I think you've given a lot of food for thought and a lot of really great ideas for our listeners. And I think there's going to be a lot of things for them to be thinking about and some changes to be made in the very near future.
Gosh, I hope so. And I have to say, you gave me a new thought. This doesn't happen in most of my interviews. I actually wrote down my notes here. It says, stress of being in a cage makes them anxious and angry. And I'm going to start thinking about that analogy, because I think it's a rich one.
Thank you so much. Well, it's a win-win.
It is. All right, great.
Well, all the best, Lenore.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marcia.
That was the inspiring Lenore Skenazy, and I'm Dr. Marcia Sirota. If you liked this podcast, please subscribe and review it on iTunes. And please sign up for my free monthly newsletter at marciasirotamd.com.